Oh, hi everyone. Have you ever been unfairly judged? Today's story will bring out some powerful emotions as we see how billionaire Sebastian Dixon faces a moment of prejudice and ends up transforming not only his own life, but also the lives of everyone around him. Join us for this inspiring journey full of unexpected twists. If you love stories of overcoming challenges, make sure to subscribe, turn on notifications, and tell me where you're watching from in the comments. Let's experience this transformative story together. What happens when a simple encounter on a plane transforms not only the life of a billionaire, but also the culture of an entire company? When Sebastian Dixon, a discreet and introspective billionaire, boards what seems to be an ordinary flight, he has no idea that an interaction marked by prejudice and judgment will trigger a journey of self-discovery and renewal. Flight attendant Bethany, upon seeing Sebastian dressed simply, makes the mistake of assuming he does not belong in first class and treats him with disdain. What she does not know is that Sebastian is, in fact, the new owner of the airline. This public humiliation will force Sebastian to confront traumas from his past and reflect on the pitfalls of power and status. The atmosphere inside the plane was tense and oppressive. Passengers exchanged glances and whispers, creating a charged environment filled with judgments and status signals. The social dynamic manifested in every interaction, revealing the prejudice that permeated society. When Bethany approached Sebastian, her evaluative and disdainful gaze made his heart race. He had always been a reserved man, accustomed to being invisible amid his wealth. But in that moment, he felt the weight of contempt, a blow that led him to sift through memories of a painful past, where loneliness and insecurity accompanied him. Sebastian had always dreamed of creating a work environment where everyone felt valued and respected. His vision of a more inclusive and welcoming airline was a deep desire that accompanied him on his journey. However, he had never faced the brutal reality of corporate elitism. As he experienced public humiliation, he realized that the pain was driving him to confront the wounds of his past and find a new purpose. Instead of seeking revenge, he decided to use his influence to promote meaningful changes within the airline. As the tension intensified, Sebastian found himself in an ethical dilemma. He knew that to implement changes, he would need to face the resistance of some skeptical colleagues and upper management who benefited from elitism. The idea of challenging the status quo made him nervous, but the determination to transform the company's culture motivated him. He recalled his past experiences, moments when his actions had a positive impact, and how that shaped his vision of leadership. During this journey, Sebastian found unexpected allies. Bethany, who initially treated him with disdain, began to feel remorse for her actions. Her quest for redemption led her to become a keen observer of the impact of Sebastian's decisions. In addition to her, a young analyst eager to prove himself and a longtime employee who felt invisible became part of this new narrative. Each of them, with their own stories and challenges, helped Sebastian understand the complexity of the work environment and the importance of empathy in human relationships. The claustrophobic corridors of the airline and Sebastian's office became symbolic locations of his transformation. Meetings that were once tense and filled with distrust began to transform into open and sincere dialogues. Over time, the change became visible. What had once been an environment of closed faces and heated discussions was now filled with smiles and a more welcoming atmosphere. Sebastian realized that true leadership was not just about having power, but about being able to listen and connect with the people around him. As his friendship with Bethany developed, they both faced insecurities and flaws, learning to trust one another. The connection they formed symbolized the transformation they wished to see in the company. Small gestures and meaningful dialogues between them revealed the power of empathy and the complexity of overcoming prejudices. Bethany, who had initially been skeptical, became an ally to Sebastian, helping him see the value in the voices that had previously been ignored. By the end of their journey, not only had the airline changed, but everyone involved, including Sebastian and Bethany, had transformed as well. The environment that once exuded elitism and judgment now breathed confidence and respect. For Sebastian, the true measure of success was not in his power or wealth, but in his ability to connect with others and to accept flaws as part of growth. He learned that the most valuable lessons were found in human interactions, and that personal transformation was the first step toward creating a better world around him. Sebastian Dixon observed the frantic movement of passengers inside the airplane, but he felt like a stranger amid that agitation. The disdain that Bethany had shown still echoed in his mind, a painful reminder that, behind his fortune, there was a vulnerability he had always tried to hide. The feeling of humiliation accompanied him like a shadow, as he wondered if he would be able to change the perception others had of him and, more importantly, the one he had of himself. Bethany, in turn, struggled with the growing guilt. Her eyes followed Sebastian as he moved down the aisle, serving the passengers. She couldn't forget the expression on his face and the way his gaze had dimmed after her scornful comment. That interaction had been a turning point, not just for him but for her as well. What had driven her attitude? The fear of losing her job. The desire to maintain the hierarchy she had always known. This reflection began to create fissures in her understanding of what it meant to serve others. In the following days, as Sebastian prepared for his new role as the owner of the airline, he faced resistance from the upper management, who were accustomed to a traditional and elitist leadership style. In one of the first meetings, he sat at the head of the table, surrounded by executives who did not hesitate to show their disdain for his ideas for change. One of the directors said, with an almost arrogant tone, that they were fine as they were, and that they didn't need radical changes because it might affect their profits. Those words weighed heavily on him, making him doubt whether he was truly prepared to face what lay ahead. Sebastian tried to articulate his ideas about inclusion and respect, but the voice inside his head whispered doubts. He remembered his childhood, the times when his family had little, and how each achievement was always met with criticism and mistrust. That criticism still haunted him. What made him different now? He had money, but did that give him the power to change something so deeply rooted? The uncertainty consumed him, and he wondered if his vision of a more welcoming airline was just a distant dream. Meanwhile, Bethany found herself caught in a similar dilemma. After the humiliation she inflicted on Sebastian, she began to observe the team dynamics with new eyes. The pressure to maintain appearances and status seemed to suffocate any idea of genuine collaboration. During a break, she approached a group of colleagues discussing the latest sales targets. One employee, who like her felt invisible, expressed concern that people were starting to feel undervalued. Bethany hesitated. Initially, those words made her nervous. What should she do? Should she oppose her colleagues or remain silent and conform? The tension between the two worlds, Sebastian's, which sought change, and Bethany's, which struggled against her team's conservatism, began to intertwine. In a moment of courage, Bethany decided to approach Sebastian after a tense meeting. She asked if she could join him, expressing her desire to understand what he was trying to do, her insecurity evident in her voice. For Sebastian, that invitation was loaded with meaning. He saw an opportunity not only to redeem himself, but also to forge a bond with someone who had unexpectedly become an ally. In the following weeks, they began to meet regularly. Bethany shared her experiences as a flight attendant, and Sebastian listened intently. He realized that, like him, she had also faced prejudice and challenges. Although their worlds were different, their stories intertwined in ways they had not perceived before. In one of those meetings, Bethany spoke about a passenger who had recently complained about unfair treatment. She admitted that she didn't know how to handle the situation, and that no one had taught her to be the voice for someone who felt helpless, revealing a side of her that was rarely exposed. The conversation made Sebastian reflect on his own journey. He too felt unprepared for the role he now occupied. Wealth had shielded him from many realities, and the struggle to connect with the people who worked for him was more challenging than he had imagined. He confessed that he also felt unsure about how to do it right, voicing his concerns about the increasing pressure and the feeling of being in a minefield where any misstep could be disastrous. Sebastian's struggle to reinvent himself and Bethany's quest for redemption became a reflection of one another. They began to build not only a friendship, but also a partnership that allowed them to explore the vulnerabilities of their situations. Both were learning to recognize their limitations, understanding that failing was part of the journey. This connection encouraged them to face the obstacles that still lay ahead, and together they began to envision a future where empathy and inclusion were not just words, but fundamental values of the new culture they wished to create within the airline. Through sincere dialogues and moments of doubt, Sebastian and Bethany started to shape one another, both wondering if they would be able to rewrite their narratives, not just for themselves, but for everyone around them. Sebastian and Bethany were venturing into uncharted territory, where their insecurities intertwined. The friendship that had begun to bloom between them was laden with promises, but also with challenges. As the weeks passed, their meetings became more frequent, but the pressure weighing on Sebastian increased each day. He realized that, as he tried to implement his ideas for inclusion, many of the executives continued to resist, while the staff grew increasingly skeptical. One morning, after a tense meeting, Sebastian returned to his office feeling defeated. Frustration consumed him. He sank into his chair, running his hands over his face. The echo of the director who had called him a naive dreamer still resonated in his mind. That word hurt him deeply, as if it were attacking not only his ideas but also his very identity. As he gazed out the window at the passing clouds, he reflected on his childhood. Past insecurities resurfaced, and he wondered if he truly had what it took to lead. On the other side of the company, Bethany was also facing her own battles. Although she was growing closer to Sebastian, the pressure of work and the expectations of her colleagues made her anxious. During a break, she overheard two co-workers murmuring about the recent proposed changes. One of them said, "He doesn't know what he's doing. This is all going to end in disaster," and the words pierced her heart. She felt divided. Was she really supporting the idea of an inexperienced leader? Doubt consumed her, and with each passing day, she questioned whether she should continue down this path. That same week, an unexpected incident occurred. A passenger began to vehemently complain about a flight delay, and in a moment of desperation, Bethany decided to intervene. She tried to explain the situation, but the man was unyielding and ended up insulting her, calling her a seller of illusions. The look of disdain he cast her way hit her like an arrow. She retreated to the restroom, where tears began to stream down her face. The humiliation was palpable, and the feeling of helplessness made her question the validity of her beliefs. She remembered her conversation with Sebastian, but now she felt she lacked the strength to fight for a better future. The weeks became an emotional roller coaster for both of them. Determined not to let the pressure win, Sebastian began working on a project aimed at improving communication between staff and upper management. However, when he presented the idea in a new meeting, he encountered even greater skepticism. "This isn't going to work, Sebastian. People aren't interested in hearing suggestions from someone who doesn't understand the reality of the company," another director said with a sarcastic smile. The sense of failure enveloped him, and a part of him began to wonder if he truly was the leader everyone expected. Meanwhile, Bethany decided to open up to Sebastian about her recent experience. In a cafe near the office, she shared her pain and frustration. "I feel like I'm fighting against a wall. Every time I try to do something different, I'm pulled back. It's like everyone wants me to conform," she said, her eyes filled with tears. Sebastian listened attentively, recognizing the struggle she faced. Bethany's vulnerability touched him deeply, but it also made him reflect on his own fragility. He realized that, like her, he was also fighting against forces trying to bring him down. That night, Sebastian couldn't sleep. He got up and started walking around the house, reflecting on everything that had happened. The weight of expectations and the pressure to succeed began to make him anxious. He questioned whether he was making the right choices, whether his ideas were truly viable. The loneliness he felt during those quiet hours made him realize that, despite his wealth, true solitude manifested in his inability to connect with people. He remembered moments when he felt part of something greater, but now he was trapped in a cycle of doubts and insecurities. Bethany, on her part, decided she couldn't let the situation dominate her. In a moment of clarity, she resolved it was time to take action. Inspired by what she had learned from Sebastian, she began to gather feedback from her colleagues about their work experiences. What started as a simple task soon transformed into a personal mission. However, resistance was intense. When she presented her findings to a group of colleagues, many looked at her with disdain. "Do you really think this will make any difference?" one of them asked, and the question made her hesitate for a moment. But instead of letting it shake her, Bethany remembered how Sebastian had fought to assert himself. The tension between them began to intensify. Sebastian felt that Bethany was facing a dilemma he knew well: the urge to fight against resistance and the doubt about whether her actions would have any impact. They became mirrors for each other, reflecting their insecurities and fears. The conversations that once brimmed with hope were now tinged with despair and struggle. Both were aware that they needed support, but the path to change seemed longer and more arduous with each passing day. When a new scandal erupted in the company involving a senior executive, the situation became even more critical. News spread quickly, and confidence in Sebastian began to waver. He felt that his attempts to create a more inclusive environment were being undermined by scandals he could not control. The pressure mounted again, and Sebastian faced a moral dilemma. Should he distance himself from the involved executive, or try to defend the structure he had known? With a heavy heart, he remembered Bethany and how she had struggled to rise after her humiliation. Instead of allowing himself to be defeated, he decided it was time to act. He called an urgent meeting with the entire team, determined to confront the situation head-on. However, he was about to discover that facing the truth was not an easy task, and the resistance he would encounter could be more challenging than anything he had ever faced. Meanwhile, Bethany, dealing with the fallout from the scandal, felt that her struggle was far from over. The voices of doubt around her began to echo, and she sensed that the friendship she was building with Sebastian was at risk. Both of their stories were about to intertwine in a climax that could define not only the future of the company, but also the trajectory of their personal lives. The fight for change was just beginning, and the real battle lay in how each of them would confront their inner demons and the weight of their choices. Sebastian prepared for the meeting with a heavy heart, a knot of anxiety forming in his stomach. He knew that the situation at the company was critical, and the scandal involving the high-ranking executive had become a point of contention that threatened to dismantle everything he had tried to build. The idea of an inclusive environment now seemed like a distant utopia, and the pressure to be the leader everyone expected only increased. As he entered the meeting room, he felt the weight of his colleagues' gazes upon him, as if each one was waiting for him to fail. The murmur of conversations abruptly stopped when he sat at the table. The air was thick with tension, and he could sense the skepticism hanging like a dark cloud. "Thank you all for being here," he began, his voice trembling. "We need to talk about what happened and how it affects all of us." As he laid out his thoughts, he realized that his words were being met with distrust. One of the directors interrupted him, a cynical expression on his face. "Do you really think this is a priority right now? With everything going on, do you still want to talk about inclusion?" The disdainful tone cut through Sebastian like a knife. He felt small, as if all his ideas, all his dreams, were being dismantled before him. The atmosphere in the room grew increasingly hostile, and he recognized that the resistance was not just towards his ideas, but also towards his leadership. He looked around, noticing the faces of his colleagues, many of whom wore expressions of disappointment and doubt. The feeling of failure enveloped him. He was there to make a difference, but it seemed that his struggle was in vain. He recalled what the director had told him weeks earlier, and began to question whether he truly was a naive dreamer. By the end of the meeting, he left the room feeling defeated. The director's words echoed in his mind, and he couldn't shake the feeling that he was losing the battle before it even began. Walking down the hallway, he felt as if the weight of the world was on his shoulders. Insecurity and doubt overtook him, and the idea of giving up on his vision began to seem tempting. Maybe I should just conform, he thought. Meanwhile, Bethany was on the other side of the company, battling her own demons. Hearing the rumors about the scandal and the criticism directed at Sebastian, she felt a pang in her heart. The friendship that had begun to blossom between them was now under threat. She knew that Sebastian was going through a difficult time, but with every sarcastic comment she overheard, her determination began to waver. What if he is really wrong? What if his idea isn't viable? These questions repeated in her mind, creating a cycle of doubt that consumed her. In a moment of courage, Bethany decided she needed to support Sebastian, regardless of the consequences. She remembered how he had encouraged her to stand up after her own humiliation. With that in mind, she made her way to his office. Upon entering, she found Sebastian sitting at the table, his head in his hands. Despair was palpable. "Sebastian," she said, her voice soft yet firm, "I know it's tough, but you can't give up. You have a vision that can change all of this. What happened today was just a setback, not the end." He lifted his head and looked at her, his eyes filled with uncertainty. "Do you really believe that, Bethany? I feel like I'm failing, like I'm losing everyone's trust. Maybe I should just leave things as they are and focus on something else." Bethany hesitated, but determination grew within her. "No, you can't let this get to you. Remember why you started. You wanted to make a difference, and that's still possible. We need to come together and not let doubt win." Her words resonated in Sebastian like an echo of hope amidst the storm. He realized that despite all the criticism and the scandal, he still had a mission. The idea of giving up began to seem less appealing. He knew that if he truly wanted to make a difference, he needed to face the resistance head-on, but he couldn't do it alone. With a renewed sense of purpose, Sebastian decided it was time to gather his team again, not just to discuss the scandal, but to talk about the importance of his vision. He wanted everyone to understand that even in times of crisis, it was essential to find strength in unity. He was determined to show that true leadership was not just about success, but about being able to rise after a fall. As he prepared for the next meeting, his emotions were in turmoil. He felt vulnerable, but also hopeful. The struggle he faced was not just his, but that of everyone around him. And just as Bethany had done, he was ready to confront his own fears and insecurities. From that moment on, Sebastian began to see life differently. He realized that true success was not just about achieving goals, but about the ability to inspire others and create an environment where everyone felt valued. He understood that the challenges he faced were not a sign of weakness, but an opportunity to grow and learn. As the friendship between Sebastian and Bethany strengthened, they became a team, ready to challenge the status quo. The road ahead would still be difficult, but together, they were determined to fight for a better future. The struggle for change was just beginning, and with it, their hearts were ready to face whatever came their way. Sebastian sat at his desk, his gaze lost in the scattered sheets of paper before him. The meeting had been a true test of his limits, and he felt exhausted. He couldn't ignore the unsettling voice whispering in his mind, "What if you fail? What if what you believe isn't enough?" Each thought weighed like a brick, and he struggled to breathe under the pressure. Meanwhile, Bethany was grappling with her own internal struggle. After encouraging Sebastian, she wondered if it had really been the best decision. What if he can't do it, she thought. Their friendship seemed to be hanging by a thread, and the fear of losing that connection consumed her. She knew Sebastian needed her, but what could she do to help him in such a critical moment? She decided she needed to take action. One morning, Bethany found a moment to meet with Sebastian again. He was sitting in a corner of the cafeteria, lost in his thoughts. As she approached, she noticed the look of concern on his face. "Hi, are you okay?" she asked, trying to sound lighthearted, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. Sebastian looked up, and a faint smile formed on his lips. "I'm trying to stay positive, but it's hard. What happened in the meeting is still on my mind. I feel like I'm fighting against a tide of doubts." She sat down across from him, determined not to let his insecurity affect her. "Do you remember what I said? This is just one battle, Sebastian. You can get back up and keep fighting." "I know," he replied, looking at his coffee cup. "But what if I'm not the right person for this? What if my vision is just a distant dream?" He felt frustration growing inside him, and his voice rose slightly. "I wish people would believe in me, but the truth is, I'm starting to doubt myself." Bethany leaned forward, her eyes fixed on his. "Doubt is natural, but you can't let it control your life. Think of everything you've accomplished, how you've inspired the people around you. You're not just a leader, you're someone who truly cares about others." Sebastian closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing her words. He remembered all the times he had risen after failures, how he had helped colleagues overcome their own challenges. But the shadow of the scandal still weighed on his mind, and he questioned whether it was enough. "What if I fail again?" he asked, almost as a whisper. The fear of repeating past mistakes was a constant burden in his heart. "What if the people around me don't support me like I expected?" Bethany thought for a moment and then said, "Failure is part of the journey, but more importantly, it's how you deal with it. You can choose to let it bring you down or use it as fuel to rise again. And if you do fail, you'll be surrounded by people who believe in you, like me." Sebastian felt a wave of gratitude for having Bethany by his side. She was not just a friend, but someone who challenged him to be better. He realized he needed to open his heart and embrace the vulnerability that came with leadership. "You're right," he said, a bit more confidently. "Maybe I need to face this situation differently. Instead of just seeing what's going wrong, I can focus on the small victories that still exist." The conversation with Bethany ignited a new light within him. He decided it was time not only to rise again, but also to gather his team to create a safe space where everyone could express their concerns and ideas. He remembered the conversations he had with his colleagues about inclusion and how it could unite the team in difficult times. In the following days, Sebastian began working on a new plan. He called a meeting, this time with a different focus. He wanted everyone to share their experiences, their struggles, and more importantly, their hopes. The idea was to create a space where each person could share their thoughts without fear of judgment. When the day of the meeting arrived, Sebastian was nervous but also excited. He saw familiar faces in the room, and this time he didn't feel the weight of expectation. He saw in each of them the same vulnerability he was facing. He began the meeting with sincerity. "Today, I'm not here to present solutions. I'm here to listen to you." The conversations began to flow. Colleagues shared their frustrations, insecurities, and also their hopes. The room transformed into a space of collaboration and empathy. Sebastian realized he was not alone in his struggle. Each shared story inspired him more and more. At the end of the meeting, one of the directors who had previously been skeptical stood up and said, "I think we're all going through a tough time, but it's encouraging to see that we're in this together. We can work together to overcome this." Seeing this change in the atmosphere gave Sebastian a renewed sense of purpose. He realized that true leadership was not just about having all the answers, but about creating a space where everyone could feel heard and valued. The connection between him and his team began to strengthen. For Bethany, watching Sebastian rise again was a relief. She felt their friendship was stronger than ever. His struggle had become a collective fight, and that brought a new energy to everyone. She realized that even if difficulties persisted, there was a transformative power in unity. However, the journey was far from over. New challenges would arise, and Sebastian knew he would have to continue facing his insecurities, but now he felt more prepared. He had learned that even in the worst storms, there was always a light to be found, and that true strength came from being surrounded by those who believed in him. Thus, he was ready to face whatever came next, with a renewed heart and a united team by his side. Sebastian sat at his desk, his gaze lost on the sheets of paper scattered before him. The meeting had been a true test of his limits, and he felt exhausted. He couldn't ignore the unsettling voice whispering in his mind. What if you fail? What if what you believe isn't enough? Each thought weighed like a brick, and he struggled to breathe under the pressure. Meanwhile, Bethany was still grappling with her own internal struggle. After encouraging Sebastian, she wondered if it had really been the best decision. What if he can't do it, she thought. Their friendship seemed to be hanging by a thread, and the fear of losing that connection consumed her. She knew Sebastian needed her, but what could she do to help him in such a critical moment? She decided she needed to take action. One morning, Bethany found a moment to meet with Sebastian again. He was sitting in a corner of the cafe, absorbed in his thoughts. As she approached, she noticed the worried expression on his face. "Hi, are you okay?" she asked, trying to sound light, but the tension in her voice was unmistakable. Sebastian looked up, and a weak smile formed on his lips. "I'm trying to stay positive, but it's hard. What happened in the meeting is still on my mind. I feel like I'm fighting against a tide of doubts." She sat down across from him, determined not to let his insecurity affect her. "Do you remember what I said? This is just one battle, Sebastian. You can get up and keep fighting." "I know," he replied, looking at his coffee cup. "But what if I'm not the right person for this? What if my vision is just a distant dream?" He felt frustration rising within him, and his voice rose slightly. "I wish people believed in me, but the truth is I'm already starting to doubt myself." Bethany leaned forward, her eyes locked on his. "Doubt is natural, but you can't let it control your life. Think about everything you've achieved, how you've inspired the people around you. You're not just a leader, you're someone who truly cares about others." Sebastian closed his eyes for a moment, absorbing her words. He remembered all the times he had risen after failures, how he had helped colleagues overcome their own challenges. But the shadow of the scandal still weighed on his mind, and he questioned whether it was enough. "What if I fail again?" he asked almost as a whisper. The fear of repeating past mistakes was a constant weight in his heart. "What if the people around me don't support me like I hoped?" Bethany thought for a moment, then said, "Failure is part of the journey. But more importantly, it's how you handle it. You can choose to let it bring you down or use it as fuel to rise again. And if you do fail, you'll be surrounded by people who believe in you, like me." Sebastian felt a wave of gratitude for having Bethany by his side. She was not just a friend, but someone who challenged him to be better. He realized he needed to open his heart and embrace the vulnerability that came with leadership. "You're right," he said, a bit more confidently. "Maybe I need to face this situation differently. Instead of just seeing what's going wrong, I can focus on the small victories that still exist." The conversation with Bethany ignited a new light within him. He decided it was time not only to pick himself up, but also to gather his team to create a safe space where everyone could express their concerns and ideas. He remembered the conversations he had with his colleagues about inclusion and how it could unite the team in tough times. In the following days, Sebastian began working on a new plan. He called a meeting, this time with a different focus. He wanted everyone to talk about their experiences, their struggles, and, more importantly, their hopes. The idea was to create a space where each person could share their thoughts without fear of judgment. When the day of the meeting arrived, Sebastian was nervous but also excited. He saw familiar faces in the room, and this time, he didn't feel the weight of expectation. He saw in each of them the same vulnerability he was facing. He began the meeting with sincerity. "Today, I'm not here to present solutions. I'm here to listen to you." The conversations began to flow. Colleagues shared their frustrations, their insecurities, and also their hopes. The room transformed into a space of collaboration and empathy. Sebastian realized he was not alone in his struggle. Each shared story inspired him more and more. At the end of the meeting, one of the directors who had been skeptical stood up and said, "I think we're all going through a tough time, but it's encouraging to see that we're in this together. We can work together to overcome this." Seeing this change in the environment gave Sebastian a new sense of energy. He realized that true leadership wasn't just about having all the answers, but about creating a space where everyone could feel heard and valued. The connection between him and his team began to strengthen. For Bethany, seeing Sebastian rise again was a relief. She felt their friendship was stronger than ever. His struggle had become a collective fight, bringing new energy to everyone. She realized that even if challenges persisted, there was a transformative power in unity. As Sebastian faced new challenges, he knew he now had solid support. He began to accept his past failures as part of the growth process. He learned to see his experiences as stepping stones to something greater, not as insurmountable barriers. With each small success, he felt stronger and more confident. The true wealth lay in the friendships he nurtured and in his ability to rise after each fall. Over time, Sebastian incorporated the lessons he learned. He became more aware of his emotions and the challenges he faced. He began to make more informed choices and act with maturity. He realized that by opening up to his team, he not only became a better leader but also a more present friend. His friendship with Bethany solidified even further. They began to share more than just professional challenges. Conversations about dreams, fears, and hopes became commonplace between them. This connection helped Sebastian see the world differently and face his emotional fears. Her presence gave him strength, and he felt that by her side, he could conquer anything. And so, Sebastian's journey was not just about overcoming, but also about transformation. He learned to embrace his vulnerability and find strength in the connections he formed. He was ready to face whatever came his way, with a renewed heart and a united team by his side. The room was filled with anticipation, and the air felt heavy. Sebastian stood at the front, watching the faces of his colleagues as the meeting began. He knew it was a crucial moment. The past few weeks had been an emotional roller coaster, and now he was about to open his heart. Doubt still haunted him, but he was determined to face his fears. "Today, I want everyone to share their concerns," he began, his voice a bit shaky. "I'm not perfect, and I know I've failed in some decisions. I'm here to listen and learn from you." A heavy silence settled in the room. Some faces were tense, while others seemed confused. Sebastian could feel the pressure mounting as time passed. A colleague, Lucas, was the first to break the silence. "Sebastian, I really appreciate that you're here to listen to us, but I don't know if I can believe that this can change anything. Things haven't been working as they should." His voice was laden with frustration, and the room resonated with the tension of his words. Sebastian felt a chill in his stomach. He remembered all the times he had tried to implement changes, only to see things fall apart. Doubt returned to plague his mind. What if he's right? What if all this is in vain? But as he looked at Lucas, he realized that his frustration was a reflection of what many were feeling. He needed to find a way to turn this tension into something positive. "I understand how you feel, Lucas," Sebastian replied, trying to calm the situation. "I'm frustrated too, but we can't change the past. What we can do is work together to find solutions." He tried to maintain his composure, but his heart was racing. The pressure was intense, and he wondered if he could truly lead this group down a new path. Others began to speak up. A colleague, Amanda, raised her hand and said, "I feel like we don't have the space to share our ideas. Often, I'm afraid to speak because I don't know how it will be received." Her gaze was desperate, and Sebastian realized that this insecurity was common among the team. He took a deep breath, feeling the weight of responsibility increasing. "This is exactly what I want to change," he asserted with more conviction. "This room should be a safe space for all of us. If we can't support each other, how can we expect to succeed?" He saw some faces nodding, but uncertainty still lingered in the air. Then, a deep silence fell over the room. Sebastian knew this was a pivotal moment. He needed to be true, not just with his team, but also with himself. "I have failed as a leader. I let fear and insecurity take over. But I'm here to learn from you and grow together. I want each of you to feel comfortable speaking, even if your words are hard to hear." He saw tears beginning to form in Amanda's eyes, and it touched his heart. Sebastian remembered his friendship with Bethany, how she had always stood by him during the darkest times. He knew he needed to be that anchor for his team. "If you give me the chance, I want to build an environment where we can all thrive, not just as colleagues, but as a true team." The tension began to dissipate. One by one, team members started to share their insecurities, their frustrations, and ultimately, their hopes. The room filled with voices, and the heavy atmosphere was replaced by a sense of community. Sebastian realized that the vulnerability he had shown had encouraged others to do the same. But as the conversation unfolded, one voice stood out in the crowd. It was the director who had been skeptical from the beginning. He stood up and said, "Sebastian, this is admirable, but do you really think this can work? What guarantees do we have that this new approach will be different from what we've tried before?" Sebastian felt his heart race again. Doubt returned to haunt him, but this time he wouldn't back down. "I can't guarantee that everything will be perfect," he replied, his voice steady. "But I can guarantee that we are all in this together. I'm not the only one responsible. We are a team, and if we fail together. But if we succeed, it will be a collective victory." The director watched him for a moment, and the room fell silent again. It was in that moment that Sebastian realized the importance of his journey. He wasn't just fighting his fears, he was also challenging the skepticism of everyone around him. He understood that true leadership wasn't about having all the answers, but about having the courage to face the tough questions. The tension in the room started to transform into hope. Colleagues began to get excited about the idea of building a new path. Conversations about collaboration and mutual support began to emerge, and the energy in the room shifted. Sebastian felt a wave of relief and gratitude. He had overcome one of the greatest challenges of his career, not just by facing his fears, but by uniting his team around a common goal. When the meeting ended, Sebastian was exhausted, but relieved. He knew that the road ahead would still be challenging, but now he was certain he wasn't alone. He had learned that true wealth lay in the relationships he cultivated, and that success wasn't just about results, but about being surrounded by people who believed in one another. Bethany looked at him with a proud smile, and Sebastian felt warmth in his heart. He realized he had built something bigger than himself. He had created a space where vulnerability was accepted and where people could grow together. The journey wasn't over, but he was ready to face whatever came next, with a renewed heart and a united team by his side. After the meeting, the atmosphere in Sebastian's workspace changed. The voices that had once been silenced now echoed with a new enthusiasm. He watched his colleagues interacting more openly, sharing ideas and supporting each other. That conversation that once seemed like a bogeyman had transformed into a catalyst for change. Sebastian sat at his desk, still feeling the adrenaline from the meeting. He couldn't help but reflect on his own journey, how he had allowed himself to be dominated by fear and insecurity, forgetting that vulnerability could be a strength, not a weakness. He had learned that by opening up to others, he was not only allowing himself to grow but also encouraging his colleagues to do the same. It was a cycle fueled by trust and empathy. Meanwhile, Lucas approached his desk. "Sebastian, I really appreciated what you did today. It was brave," he said with a genuine smile. "I think many of us needed that push. I was starting to lose hope." Sebastian smiled back, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thank you, Lucas. We're all in this together, and you also have an important role. Your voice is valuable, and I want you to feel comfortable sharing your ideas whenever possible." What had once been walls of distrust and discouragement was now transforming into a vibrant space of creativity and collaboration. Amanda, who had seemed so insecure during the meeting, now approached Sebastian with a new sparkle in her eyes. "I thought of an idea for the project we are developing. Can I share it with you?" She seemed more confident, and that made Sebastian happy. "Of course, Amanda, I'm eager to hear," he replied, feeling excited about the new dynamic that was forming. He realized that by valuing everyone's contributions, He was helping to build a culture of respect and support. This was truly rewarding. In the following days, the team began to meet more frequently, not just to discuss tasks, but also to share experiences and personal challenges. Sebastian noticed that as relationships deepened, productivity increased as well. People felt more motivated and engaged, and the work environment became lighter. What had once been a burden was now a shared journey. However, doubt still haunted Sebastian. He knew that change wouldn't happen overnight. There was a long road ahead, and old habits might try to resurface. In a conversation with Bethany, he expressed his concerns. What if all this falls apart? What if people start to feel unmotivated again? Bethany, always a source of support, looked into his eyes. Sebastian, change takes time, but you've already taken the first step. You've created a space where people feel safe to express themselves. That's what makes the difference. Trust the process and the strength of your team. Her words resonated in his mind. He began to realize that true success wasn't just about hitting targets, but about building an environment where everyone could grow. Over time, he felt more confident in his ability to lead, understanding that the vulnerability he had shared was the key to connecting with his team on a deeper level. As the months passed, interactions within the team changed drastically. People began to support each other, offering help on projects and celebrating one another's victories. Everyone was part of a larger whole, and this brought a renewed sense of purpose. Sebastian saw the transformation in his colleagues. Lucas, who had once been so frustrated, now led brainstorming meetings with enthusiasm. Amanda, once shy, became an active and respected voice on the team. Sebastian also began to open up to the possibility of failure. He realized that failing wasn't the end, but an opportunity to learn. This new mindset helped alleviate the pressure he placed on himself. He was more willing to experiment, knowing that the team was by his side. His friendship with Bethany grew even stronger. They shared not only the highs and lows of work life, but also their personal hopes and fears. This connection became a pillar in his life, reminding him that vulnerability and empathy were essential, both at work and in personal relationships. Sebastian looked back and saw how much he had grown. He had overcome his limitations and learned to deal with uncertainty in a healthier way. He was no longer just a leader, but a true facilitator of change. With a renewed heart and a united team by his side, he was ready to face whatever came next, knowing that true success was found in the shared journey and the human connections he had cultivated along the way. Sebastian looked out the window of his office, watching the leaves of the trees dancing in the wind. The sun shone brightly, and he couldn't help but smile as he recalled the journey he had charted. The transformation that occurred within the team was not just a change in the work environment, it was a reflection of his own evolution. He felt stronger, more authentic, and above all, more connected to others. Weeks went by, and the team continued to grow. Sebastian remembered how insecurity had consumed him in a not-so-distant past. He was afraid of not being good enough, of not being able to lead effectively. But now, looking at his colleagues, he saw something different. He saw confidence, creativity, and a spirit of unity that had previously been mere shadows. The vulnerability he had chosen to embrace had transformed into a powerful strength, not just for him, but for everyone around him. He realized that his actions and words had the power to impact lives. Lucas, who once felt lost, was now an inspiring leader. Amanda, who struggled with her shyness, had become a passionate advocate for her ideas. Every small victory of the team was proof that they were in this journey together, and Sebastian felt honored to have played a key role in this process. However, what surprised him the most was the friendship that formed with Bethany. Together, they not only shared work experiences but also moments of vulnerability that created an unbreakable bond. She became a confidant, someone he could rely on during tough times. This unexpected friendship helped him understand that true wealth was not measured in possessions, but in the connections formed between people. Sebastian began attending leadership and personal development workshops, always seeking to learn and grow. He knew that change was an ongoing process and that even as he reached new heights, there would always be room for evolution. He became a mentor for new employees, sharing his experiences and encouraging them to open up and be authentic. Every story he heard and every challenge he helped solve made him more aware of the impact he could have on the lives of others. Over time, he became an advocate for a culture of empathy in the company. Sebastian organized regular meetings where the team could discuss not only projects but also their lives outside of work. He realized that these moments of connection were crucial for strengthening bonds among colleagues. People began to feel more comfortable sharing their personal struggles, creating an environment where everyone felt supported and understood. In one of these meetings, Amanda shared how the courage to open up had changed her life. She talked about how, by becoming more confident, she had enrolled in a graphic design course, something she had always dreamed of but never had the courage to pursue. Her words resonated deeply with Sebastian, who saw how the culture he had helped create was allowing others to discover themselves as well. Reflecting on all this, Sebastian realized that true wisdom was not just in the ability to lead, but in understanding the value of shared experiences. He learned to see life differently, to appreciate the small victories, and to view challenges as opportunities for growth. Every failure was a chance to start anew, and he was determined not to let fear paralyze him again. Sebastian's journey also impacted his personal life. He began to relate better to friends and family, applying the lessons of empathy and vulnerability in his daily interactions. Conversations became deeper, more meaningful, and he felt more connected to who he truly was. The peace that had previously eluded him now became a part of his life, and he learned to live in harmony with his emotions. The transformation was not limited to the team or his personal life. Sebastian became an advocate for mental health in the workplace, promoting initiatives that encouraged the team to take care of themselves and seek help when needed. He understood that in such a fast-paced world, taking a pause to care for emotional well-being was essential. As time went by, Sebastian became an example for many. His story of overcoming and transformation inspired others to open up, connect, and support one another. He saw how, by embracing his vulnerability, he had created a support network that extended beyond the walls of the office. Sebastian smiled as he recalled his journey. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but now he was prepared to face them. With a heart full of gratitude and a renewed spirit, he was ready to continue his path, knowing that true wealth lay in the relationships he had cultivated and the lives he had touched along the way. Sebastian looked out the window once again, admiring the dance of leaves in the wind. The sun was still shining, but now its light reflected not only the external environment, but also the internal transformation he had experienced. He remembered the challenges he had faced, the insecurities that haunted him, and how all of that felt so distant now. As a new man, he had reinvented himself, not only as a leader, but as a human being. The journey had not been easy, but each step taken had brought him to this point. When he gathered with the team, Sebastian realized that the changes were not just personal. The atmosphere in the office pulsed with a new energy. Conversations that were once merely professional now intertwined with life stories, challenges, and achievements. He recalled a recent conversation with Lucas, who was now confidently leading a project. "Sebastian," Lucas said, "never thought he could be so open about his ideas and fears. You really showed us the way." And this touched Sebastian's heart. He knew that true leadership was not about having all the answers, but about creating a space where everyone felt safe to share their stories. Amanda, with her new graphic design course, was proof that courage could flourish in a welcoming environment. "Your vulnerability inspired me, Sebastian," she said in one of the meetings. "Now, I feel like I can be myself." These words echoed the mission he had embraced. The transformation of the team was a collective victory, reflecting the strength that emerged from each individual. He remembered the friendship he had developed with Bethany, a connection that deepened through sincere conversations and moments of mutual support. "I never thought I could have someone like you who really understands," she had told him one day, making him realize that friendship was one of life's greatest riches. Sebastian also looked at his personal life and saw how his relationships had become deeper. He talked more with his friends and family, not just about superficial issues, but about feelings, dreams, and vulnerabilities. This new way of connecting brought a peace he never imagined possible. It's amazing how we can open up and be authentic, he reflected in a conversation with his sister. That changes everything. Sebastian's transformation was not just about him. It was about everyone around him. He had become an advocate for mental health at work, promoting the importance of caring for one another. "We need to talk about how we feel," he said in meetings. "This is how we grow together." The response was positive, and the team began adopting practices that prioritized emotional well-being, creating an environment where everyone felt seen and valued. As the months passed, Sebastian felt that his journey of self-discovery and overcoming challenges had shaped him in ways he could never have imagined. He was no longer the insecure man who feared the future. Now, he was someone who saw each challenge as an opportunity for growth. Failure was not a burden, but a lesson propelling him forward. He remembered a moment when he had failed on an important project and how it led him to seek feedback and support. Sometimes, you have to fall to learn how to get up, he thought. The true definition of success had become clear to him. It was not about status or position. It was about the relationships he had built and the impact he had on others' lives. He had become a catalyst for change, and that was the greatest achievement he could aspire to. In a world where superficiality often prevails, he found value in human connections. Sebastian took a deep breath, feeling gratitude flood his being. He knew there were still challenges ahead, but now he was ready to face them. With a heart full of love and a renewed spirit, he was prepared to continue his journey, knowing that each step taken was a celebration of life and the relationships he had cultivated. And so, he turned to the team with a genuine smile. "Let's continue to support each other and grow together. Each of us has an important story to tell. And together we can make a difference." The room filled with laughter and applause, an echo of what they had become. At the end of the day, he reflected on everything he had learned. "True wealth is not in possessions, but in the connections we make," he thought. And each of us has the ability to impact each other's lives in ways we cannot even imagine. Sebastian invited everyone to open up, share their stories, and connect more deeply. "Let's do something together," he said, Brian, with a sparkle in his eyes. "Let's continue the journey of transformation, not just as colleagues, but as a family." Thus, he left a clear message. True overcoming begins when we open our hearts and allow ourselves to be vulnerable. He encouraged everyone to reflect on their own journeys and share their experiences in the comments. "Together, let's build a safe and welcoming space," he concluded, "because every story matters." And with that call to action, Sebastian knew that his journey was just beginning. But now he was no longer alone. He had a team, a family, and together they could create a bright future. What was the moment that touched your heart the most, or left you speechless? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and share your reflections with us. Your perspective is essential in helping us bring more inspiring stories to life. If you know someone who would be moved by this story, don't hesitate to share this video with them. Let's spread stories that inspire and touch hearts. And if you're eager for more narratives that capture the essence of life and transformation, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to be the first to see our new videos that promise to take you on an emotional journey. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to leave a like. I can't wait to read your thoughts in the comments. Thank you for watching, and see you in the next story.